I never imagined that silence could feel so loud in a house that once echoed with laughter. My husband and I had grown used to the quiet, I suppose. After years together, the warmth faded slowly, like embers dying in a fire that no one bothered to stoke. He had his routines, his work, his endless meetings and late dinners. I had the house, my garden, and the ghost of connection I used to crave. When Daniel, my stepson, came home from college for the summer, I didn't think much of it. He was polite, always respectful. He had grown up well, tall, composed, with a quiet intelligence in his eyes. The kind that watches, not just sees. We never had a deep bond when he was younger. I came into his life when he was a teenager, and by then, he'd already built walls. But something was different now. The first few days, I noticed small things. He'd ask how I was doing and actually listen. He'd offer to help in the kitchen or sit outside with me while I watered the plants. No one had done that in so long. When I dropped something, he'd pick it up without a word. When I looked tired, he'd bring me tea. Once, I caught him watching me, not in a way that felt wrong, but in a way that said he noticed me as more than background. I started talking to him, without realizing it, about my day, about little things that didn't matter. He was easy to talk to. He listened, and when I apologized for rambling, he just smiled and said, "It's fine. Nothing's going to happen. I'm just here." That line stuck with me. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the comfort I felt was maternal, that he was just being kind, and I was lonely. But there were moments that made my breath catch, like when he brushed past me in the hallway and his hand grazed my back. It lingered. Not long. Just enough. I started thinking about what I wore. Just subtle changes. A softer dress, hair brushed a little neater. He complimented my cooking, said no one made food like I did. My husband hadn't said something like that in years. At night, I would lie awake and think about our conversations. They weren't deep or romantic, but they mattered to me. They reminded me I existed, that someone saw me. Once, while clearing the table, I laughed at something he said, and he just watched me. When I turned to him, he looked away. That silence between us was louder than anything I'd heard in years. I knew a line was there. I knew where it was. I could see it clearly. But I also knew I was inching toward it every day. And Daniel, with his calm voice and steady gaze, kept saying, "Nothing's going to happen." But deep down, I wasn't sure I believed him. He started staying up later, always ending up in the kitchen when I was there. It became a pattern neither of us acknowledged. We didn't plan it. It just happened. He'd lean against the counter, arms crossed, and ask about my day. Not out of obligation, his voice carried curiosity, as if what I said mattered. That was dangerous. I knew it, but I didn't stop. Once I mentioned how tired I was, how the house never seemed to rest. He looked at me, quiet for a second, then said, "You don't have to do it all alone." It hit harder than it should have. My husband never noticed things like that anymore. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. He understood. He began helping me more, doing small things that built up, taking out the trash without asking, fixing a leaky faucet, carrying groceries in. Always present. Always steady. I found myself waiting for him to appear, listening for his steps in the hallway. I hated that. I hated how much it started to mean. It was emotional first. That's what made it harder. Nothing physical. Just attention. Just warmth. When he touched my arm lightly while reaching past me, I felt the air change. My chest tightened. I stepped away, but the tension hung there, heavy and charged. He apologized once. Not for the touch, but for making things weird. I told him it wasn't weird. That was my first lie. We sat outside one evening, the sky dimming, quiet between us. I told him things I hadn't told anyone, about how I felt invisible, how marriage had become routine. I said too much. He listened, nodded, never interrupted. At one point, I felt him looking at me and I turned. Our eyes met, and something passed between us, silent, undeniable, but unspoken. He looked away and muttered, "Still, nothing's going to happen. It's not like that." Except it was. I started avoiding mirrors. I didn't want to see the woman I was becoming. Someone who felt drawn to something forbidden, not by lust, but by need. A need to feel wanted, understood, heard. It crept in slowly, like fog, until it filled every space. The moments kept adding up. Standing too close. Laughing too long. A glance held 1 second too long. I began dreaming about him. Not sexual, just closeness. Peace. That should have scared me more than it did. One afternoon, he helped me with a stuck window. Our hands touched. We didn't pull away. I held his gaze for too long. No words. Just breath and tension, and too much meaning in something so small. When I turned to walk away, he said softly, "You deserve to feel seen." I didn't answer. I couldn't. But that night, I sat in bed and thought about it for hours. The way he said it, the way he made me feel, without even trying. I knew where this was going, and I didn't stop it. It happened on a night that didn't start any differently. My husband was out, as usual, some business dinner that ran late. I was home, pacing, restless, thoughts loud and scattered. When Daniel walked in, it was like the room shifted. He looked at me for a long time, said nothing, then walked past. But he didn't leave. He stayed, lingering in the same space like he was waiting for something to unfold. I offered tea just to break the silence. He accepted. We stood across from each other, too close for comfort but not touching. Every part of me screamed to move, to say something normal, something that would anchor us back to safety. But nothing came. His eyes didn't waver. He asked if I was okay. I said I didn't know. It was the truth. He stepped closer. I should have stopped him. I didn't. My breath caught, and my hands trembled, but I didn't move. I didn't say no. He brushed a loose strand of hair behind my ear. That was the moment. Small, almost innocent, but it unraveled me. My heart pounded. I could barely speak. He whispered, "You don't have to pretend anymore." Then his hand cupped my cheek. Soft, patient, no rush. I leaned into it. That was all the permission he needed. He kissed me, gently, almost afraid. But I didn't pull away. I kissed him back. It was slow, full of hesitation. Like both of us were afraid of what we'd find on the other side. But we kept going. The lines blurred fast. My mind screamed about betrayal, about right and wrong, but my body had already decided. Everything was quiet except for our breathing. There were no words after that. Just motion, closeness, skin, heat. A release of everything we'd been holding back. It wasn't passion. It was desperation. It wasn't about lust. It was about feeling alive just for a moment. After, we didn't speak for a while. I couldn't look at him. Guilt hit hard. Not because of what we did, but because it had felt like exactly what I'd been needing. That terrified me more than anything. He finally broke the silence. I didn't mean for this to happen. I wanted to ask what it meant, if it changed anything, but I couldn't form the words. My heart was thudding in my ears. I nodded like I understood, but I didn't. Nothing made sense. He got up and left the room. No drama. No big goodbye. Just quiet footsteps and a closed door. I sat there, still, heavy, wrecked by the weight of what I'd allowed. I didn't cry. I just sat in the thick silence, realizing I had crossed a line I could never uncross. And no matter what I told myself before, that it was harmless, that it was emotional, that nothing would happen, everything had changed. The next morning, the air felt different. Heavy like it knew. I moved through the house like a stranger in my own life. I avoided mirrors, avoided him. I heard him in the kitchen, but I didn't go out. My husband had come home late, didn't ask questions, didn't notice a thing. That almost made it worse. He sat beside me at breakfast like nothing had shifted, like I wasn't drowning in silence. Daniel didn't speak to me that day. No text, no glance. He stayed in his room or left the house. The avoidance was deliberate, and I didn't chase him. What could I say? What did I expect? There was no version of this where anything made sense. He had become the one thing that made me feel again, and now he was a reminder I couldn't escape. Days passed. He was quiet, polite, distant. Like rewinding into the person he used to be, only now with knowledge neither of us could forget. I noticed him packing a suitcase. He was supposed to stay longer. I didn't ask why. He didn't explain. The message was clear. I stood in the hallway, watching the door close behind him, and all I could think about was the last thing he said before everything changed. Nothing's going to happen. It echoed in my mind, not with irony, but with sadness. He believed it when he said it.
So did I.
But life doesn't bend around intention. It just moves forward, indifferent. I kept walking through my days, holding it all in. The guilt wasn't loud. It was quiet, constant, like background noise. My husband remained unaware, still distant, still distracted. I wanted to blame him, to justify what I did by pointing at all the moments he let me feel alone. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was I chose it. I crossed the line. I thought the hardest part would be the act itself, but it wasn't. It was the after. The knowing. The way it followed me through every conversation, every silent dinner, every time I looked at my husband and remembered the man I used to want him to be. I never told anyone. Not because I was protecting Daniel or my marriage, but because saying it out loud would make it real. And I wasn't ready to face that version of myself. The version that blurred lines, chased connection in the wrong place, let silence become intimacy. He didn't come back after summer. He stopped calling. I heard from my husband that Daniel had moved to a new city. I nodded like it didn't mean anything, like it wasn't the final cut. But I felt it.
Deep.
Sometimes at night, I still hear his voice. That calm, careless reassurance. Nothing's going to happen. And I close my eyes because now I know everything already did. And I will carry it, not because I was punished, but because I finally understood what it means to be seen by the wrong person at the right time.